In this state, if an officer asks you for ID, you must provide it. There's no law anywhere that says that.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, you don't have to have a license or an ID in any state. All you need to do is provide your name and date of birth. As citizens, we're required to know the law. Okay, when we go in front of a judge, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So we have to know the law. Cops are also citizens. As citizens, they should know the law. But when they put on that costume, all of a sudden, they don't need to know the law.
They have the guns, the manpower, the prisons, and the prison guards, and they're in control, and they're not playing by your rules. They've got their own set of rules.
Anytime there's an arrest, I try to file a lawsuit. One of the lawsuits I'm involved in right now, they had handcuffed me and my buddy, whose name is Bad Cop No Donut. And you really hate all cops, don't you? You really hate the government. And I said, no, ma'am. I says, I hate bad police. I'm literally probably one of the most hated men in the Southeast United States. 10 minutes later, the sheriff pulls up on the side of the street. We're walking on the sidewalk, detains us. Literally, no lying, about 15 other cops show up. Sheriff, police, state troopers, right? All show up, illegally detain us, illegally ID us, and then after 30 minutes end up letting us go. I got 2 lawsuits that day.
Hey, this is Matt Cox, and we have an interview with the owner and operator of the YouTube channel Rogue Nation. He is a First Amendment auditor, and I've watched a bunch of his videos, and I was suggested that I interview him. He's going to make a great interview. He's got a great story, so check out the interview. So what is a First Amendment auditor?
First Amendment auditor is someone that goes out to test the response that our public officials give to people that are looking for accountability. We go into places that the public's allowed to be in traditionally, like city halls, lobbies of police departments, lobbies of health departments. Anywhere the public's allowed to be, we're allowed to record. And so we just go out there and we test that to make sure that they understand that and uphold that. And in a lot of cases, they don't understand that, and they think they have power that they don't really have. So when I tell people what it is I do, and when people ask me, well, what's your news story about, because we're independent journalists, they say, well, what's your news story about? It says every single video of mine is the same news story. Mm-hmm. It's overstepping of authority. That's all it is, right? They have some authority, yes. But when they come and tell you not to do something that you're allowed to do, that's when they overstep their authority.
Right.
And that's what I document. I document government officials overstepping their authority. Most people don't realize that the freedom of the press traditionally and the constitutional intent is the right to shame our public officials into doing what is noble. And that comes to us from the 1774 letter from the Continental Congress to the inhabitants of Quebec when they were talking to them about the greatness of our rights. And the reason being is because even back then, corruption ran rampant, even in the colonies. So they understood that without people to watch over and to publicly shame them into doing what's noble, they realized that they would run unchecked.
They're untouchable. Right?
And that's what's happened. Americans got complacent and never checked on their officials. They said, "Oh, I voted. I'm good for another 4 years. I'll just go back to my little life, and trying to get mine." And they don't look. They expect the government to watch over the government, and I equate that to the mafia watching over the mafia.
Right.
So
yeah. I was gonna say, listen, the first thing that happens when a tyrant takes over is he gets hold of the media immediately.
Absolutely.
Mussolini, Hitler, Stalin,
and
as soon as they come in,
there's no denying that there's only a few people that run the most major media corporations now in the world.
Yeah,
and they all pretty much have that byline, and I know people in media, and they all tell me the same thing. If
listen, that video with Joe. I saw Joe Rogan did it, but I've seen the video where it literally has 50 different news organizations all saying the exact same. Have you seen it?
Yes.
It's like the first time I saw it, like the hair on my arms went whoosh.
It's chilling.
Yeah. And to sit there and say, and here's what I noticed just being in when I was locked up, and I would get, let's say I'm doing a story on you. I would order a bunch of all the news clippings on you. So I get them all. And one of the things I would always end up getting was whatever the U.S. attorney's press release was. And really, if there were 30 articles on you when you, let's say, got arrested for some crime, it was really the day after the U.S. attorney did a press release. It was really, they were just rewriting the exact same thing that U.S. attorney. Like maybe one outlet might have called your mother or your sister or somebody to get a quote. And other than that, they were almost identical. Mm-hmm. And it was like, so they're putting out press releases. You guys are just regurgitating it. You're not calling anybody. You're not checking any facts. You're just taking exactly what they say and rewriting it like it was. And I remember thinking, this is nuts. But I didn't even notice that until I started doing the research. Right. Otherwise, I always thought, oh, well, they must be finding these things out themselves, making calls. No, because you're only reading one. You're not reading 6.
Right.
If you read 6 or 8 of them, you start to go,
you see a pattern.
This is nuts.
Yep.
This is exactly the same thing the press release said.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's...
They're just a mouthpiece. Today, now, the mainstream media is just a mouthpiece for the governing bodies. And the reason for that is and again, I talk to people in journalism, and they tell me, that if they cast bad light on the city or the police department...
They're excluded now.
They're excluded now. So it's one hand washes the other. So, we won't give you any news stories, or we won't give you any, breaking news if you don't, do what we want you to do, which is, run your story by us so that way we can see that we're being cast in the right light.
You would think with how easy it is to put out content and how many formats there are to put out, you would get better quality and more accurate news now than ever. But you're really getting a more censored version of the news than ever. Absolutely.
And that's why people have taken to the streets. Some people realize that, and they say, the only way that I'm going to get good information about my local area is to go out there myself.
Right.
And now we're seeing these people at the city hall meetings and asking questions like First Amendment auditors and stuff like that.
All right. Let's go back to the beginning. Basically, really, where were you born? Like, were you born in Florida or?
I am a Florida native. I was born in Orlando, Florida, at the Florida Hospital, Winter Park. And I spent, couple years here. My mother divorced my father, moved me up to Chicago, and for most of my life I moved around. I spent about half my life in Chicago, half my life in Florida, with a couple of years in Seattle, San Francisco, and Phoenix, and Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Why? I don't understand. Why'd you move around so much?
Well, I wanted to find out where the best place was to live.
This is when you were a kid?
This was like 18 or 19. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like when I was like 18 or 19. Because, like I said, I spent a good amount of time up until 13 years old up in Chicago. Then I moved back down to Florida with my father from 13 to 18. And all my buddies down here said, man, Florida's great. Best place to live. I'm not going to live anywhere else. I was like, you never been anywhere else. Right. You know what I mean? And you can't really gauge how good of a place is to live by going to visit for a couple of days or vacationing for a week. So, I got out on the bus and, took my money and took my chances and went to a couple different spots to see if it was true. And, I love California. I love living out there, but too expensive. When I was out there was the year 2000 going into 2001, and I was a young guy, 27, 28, and I realized I didn't have a girlfriend or family or anything out there at the time. I realized, I said, this isn't where I can create a family.
Right.
I can't afford it. So I moved back to Indiana. I found my the wife that I have now, and we've been together ever since. It's been over 20 years now, 21 years.
What do you do for a living?
Traditionally, I'm a server bartender, and I've done that for about 30 years now. I've been with the same company, which I won't reveal because trolls on the internet like to harass. But I've been with the same company coming on 17 years now, and I built such a relationship with them. And they're a top 500 company. They are a big restaurant industry. And, I've worked with him so long and so hard, and my boss understands my work ethic that I pretty much make my own schedule now. So he'll text me and he'll say, can you work? And
Right.
that's how I work now is he texts me, are you free this day to work? Because he knows I go all over the country doing this. So, I could be in South Carolina tomorrow or Texas next week, so.
Okay. So what happened? So what happened that you got into doing is there a story behind
Yeah.
how you just open up TikTok and say,
No.
that's for me.
Years ago, about 10 years ago, I was surfing the internet and I came across sovereign citizens, right? And they had this thing where they said, oh, your license, and it's all capital letters and all this other stuff. So I told my wife, I said, baby, in 6 months, I'm throwing away my license and I'm throwing away my tag. I said, I'm driving down the road. Well, 6 months came and I realized, I'm like, some of these guys, what they're saying is not altogether true, or it's not getting them the results they want. So I started
Met a lot of those guys in prison.
Yeah, I started reading law myself, and I would pick up law books from thrift stores, or I downloaded PDFs online, and it helps that since the around the seventh grade, I was reading about 500 to 800 pages a day, and I could retain about 70 to 80% of it. Now at that time, it was nonfiction. It was, Hardy Boys and The Three Detectives by Alfred Hitchcock and stuff like that. I was, just in the seventh grade. But as I grew older...
You mean fiction?
Fiction.
You said nonfiction.
Sorry. Yeah, fiction. But as I got older, it became more nonfiction. So now in my home, you'll find, 300-year-old history books, 200-year-old law books that I collect. And that's what I read because... knowledge is everything. So my progression went like this. I looked into the sovereign citizen stuff. I dismissed it as not being viable. I looked into some conspiracy theories, and, when I got the knowledge of what was going on in the conspiracy theory realm, I started talking to people, and I got negative reactions. And to me, it seemed like this is suspicious. We should look into it. No one gave a damn. So I was like, all right. I said, maybe I need a different approach. So I started reading economics, and I got into the whole usury fiat currency system and how they're manipulating us that way. And I said, now I could take this to people and they'll understand that, right? It's math. You can't deny it. 1 + 1 is 2.
Right.
Well, they still denied it. So I'm like, what the hell's going on? So then I got into psychology. I started reading about Edward Bernays. I started reading about groupthink. I started reading about neuro-linguistic programming and all that other stuff. And then I realized why people do what they do and think what they think and all that other stuff. And then from there, I said, well, we can only wake people up if we show them that there's a problem. Right now, America doesn't realize there's a problem with policing because they don't see it. So I equate it to an alcoholic that doesn't know he's an alcoholic. He's not looking to go to AA, right? He doesn't think there's a problem.
Yeah, first step is realizing there is a problem.
Exactly. Yeah. And America still needs to realize that there is a problem with our system, right? And a lot of times people aren't going to do that because half the people, their party's in power. So nothing's wrong with the system,
right?
And I saw that year after year, election after election, when the Republicans got into office, well, then the Democrats would say, oh, well, these guys, it's the Antichrist, and, these guys are it's all corrupt and the system's going to fall apart. Well, then 4 years later, the Democrats would get in power and the Republicans would say, well, this guy's the Antichrist, and this guy is, he's going to bring it down and all this other stuff. It just changed sides each and every time. And I told myself, I said, people need to realize that there's a problem with the system. And the only way to do that is to show them that. And I came across a guy by the name of Jeff Gray and another gentleman by the name of Joel Chandler. They're both Florida guys. Jeff Gray's from St. Augustine. I'm not sure where Joel Chandler's from, but these guys had picked up cameras and they were going out and they were confronting government. They were getting public records and they were asking questions of the government. And I said, this is the way forward, right?
Well, and now you have a platform. By this point, you actually have a platform where I guess like in 2000, you don't really have it. Even if you got that footage, like there wasn't really anywhere to put that footage. You couldn't get that out there anywhere in 2000. When was YouTube even started? Was it 2000? Or
a little bit after, I think.
Yeah,
2002 or something like that.
I was going to say, and even then it took a while for it to take off. People really started utilizing it. I was going to say the one other thing made me think of with the sovereign citizen thing is that I have a buddy named Chris Moreno, and he could quote every single thing about sovereign citizens. He could show you the law. He could talk about how the law that says you have to pay federal income tax was never ratified, and how this was never this and this was never this. He could show all of that stuff, and I would say, yeah, but the problem is that in the end, all of that could be true.
Yeah.
In the end, they have the guns, the manpower, the prisons, and the prison guards, and they're in control, and they're not playing by your rules. They've got their own set of rules. I was like, so you can spout all this, and every sovereign citizen I've ever met in federal prison, the whole 5 years that they did, or 3 years or 2 years that they served, they complained and said how they were illegally being sentenced the entire 5 years. But you know what they did? They did the whole 5 years. They got out. They did their probation.
Yeah.
So what does it matter if they're not playing by those rules? You can show me the law.
Yeah.
But the judge says no, and the prosecutors say this, and then they tell this guy to lock you up, and you can tell every single person along the way, hey, this isn't right. The law says this, and they're like, yeah, I understand. Get in the cage.
Yeah.
Handcuff up. Do this. Take your clothes off. Get in that. You're getting in prison. It's like, what the fuck?
It makes no difference if you know the law, if everyone around you doesn't know the law.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I tell people with the right to travel, do we have a right to travel? Absolutely, we have a right to travel. Do we have a right to drive an automobile without a license? Absolutely. You do. Okay. Not a motor vehicle, which is what all vehicles are now.
Right.
But an automobile, you absolutely do. We do have that right. However, every time you drive down the road, you will get pulled over. The officer won't realize that you have the right. You will get arrested. Your car will be impounded, and you will go to court.
Right.
You can do that to your heart's content, and it's never going to change. So what is more free? Is it more free to spend all your time in court, bonding out your car and bonding out yourself? Or is it just to go get a license and drive wherever you want?
Right.
So they hold all the cards, and American is brainwashed pretty thoroughly. We get that 12 years of state education where they beat into our heads how great the Constitution is and how we should obey authority and
how you should be an employee. You should go work at Walmart.
That's right. What's funny is they never say you need to work hard, create a job.
Right.
It's never that.
No.
You need to get a job, not create a job.
Yeah, it's funny. They don't teach you even how to balance a checkbook, how to open a bank account, how credit cards work, how to pay credit cards, how credit works, like all the things that really would help you be super successful in a financial way. They don't really teach you that. They teach you how to follow directions, fill out an application, go get your job at Walmart, stock the shelves, listen to your boss, be a good, get your 2 weeks pay for a vacation, be a good employee, buy a house, pay it off by the time you get your Social Security benefits, and live within your means.
That's it.
That's the perfect lower middle class, because the middle class is almost non-existent in the United States. So that's your perfect lower middle class existence right there. That's what high school prepares you for at this point.
And that's what school was set up to specifically do. Woodrow Wilson had a speech in 1908 to the New York Teachers Association. And in that speech, he said, in the time that we have, we can only do certain things. So by necessity, we can only educate a small percentage of the population. And then by necessity, a larger portion of the population has to be educated just enough to do menial tasks of labor to help society. That's what they set up the public school system for. Now, when you look at it,
well, they've pulled it off.
Oh yeah, yeah. They had no opposition
Right.
because nobody understood, nobody cared, and again, people have always been focused on my life.
Mm-hmm.
How do I make my life better, right? So I'll vote every 4 years, depending on what I believe, Republican or Democrat. But then after that voting's done, I'm going to go back to my own little world. I'm going to worry about my job, about my, taking the kids to soccer practice. And, freedom sometimes can be a hindrance, right? When you have 536 channels of TV to choose from, that freedom can be detrimental to you.
Right.
Because now you're wasting time. You're not doing anything productive. You're not learning law or psychology or currency. I'm a big proponent of every human needs more than a passing understanding of the three things that every human being on the planet uses every day of their life: the law, their mind, and their money. If in school, if that was all they taught, you would have the most educated society ever known to the world if they taught those three things. Because once you learn how to use your mind, you can teach yourself.
Right. Once
you know how to learn your money, you'll never be defrauded. And once you learn the law, you know the rules that you have to abide by. Like we were talking earlier, I don't get scared when a cop approaches me. Not at all. 20 years ago, I'd shake in my boots.
Right.
Because I didn't know the law. I didn't know the limits of their authority. I didn't know what they could do. I didn't know what I could do. But once I started learning the law, everything became clear. I said, you know what? You can't do that. I'm not scared of you. You know what I mean? You can't force me to do this or force me to do that.
Right. So, sorry, I got you off track. You were talking about the two guys that were taking cameras, and
Joel Chandler and Jeff Gray.
Yeah.
And those guys, Jeff Gray is probably one of the original starters of the movement. He joined a group called PNAC, which stood for Photography is Not a Crime. And that was started by Carlos Miller out of Miami. And basically they would go around, they would do audits, but they would also do public record requests. And they had a lot of case law made here in Florida, Joel Chandler specifically, about getting public records. And it intrigued me because whenever I went to the government to ask questions, they just ignore me like they do most citizens, but these guys were getting results. And I said, that's what I need to do. I need to pick up a camera. I need to go out there. I need to start questioning these guys, but I need to know the law behind it as well. Now, one of the things that got me and Jeff Gray specifically started doing this kind of activity is the Dozier School for Boys. Have you ever heard of it?
Was this the one where they were killing all those kids?
80 to 90 kids were murdered and raped, and no one was ever prosecuted for the crime.
And they were just finding like like what, 50, 80 years later? When was this?
Supposedly the murdering and raping went on from the 40s to the 60s, and they didn't start finding the bodies until 2012.
The boys' school in
boys' prison.
Prison in
Marianna, Florida. I want to say it's in Jackson County, but it's up in the Panhandle. But the city's called Marianna.
So I mean, think about it. Your kid's in trouble. He gets in trouble. He's sent there for whatever, a year. A year later, when their parents think, hey, he should be getting out, where is he? They say, oh, we released him. He didn't come home. Well, he's a runaway. Like,
yeah.
What he was a bad kid anyway. He was sent to prison. So nobody really looks for him. They think, oh, he ran away. He was a problem. But really, they've been molesting the kid in prison. They beat him to death or killed him. They just buried the body.
That's
usually
right.
Prison officials.
Right. Of course, because who else could it have been?
Right.
Right. So my issue was the fact that, because I've been in facilities, right? And I know they do roll call every night. You're sitting on your bunk, you're calling out your name,
Right.
you're white Caucasian, 772566 DOC. So my thing is how did kids just disappear? This is a secure facility.
Right.
I mean, it's secure, fences, barbed wire, everything. They didn't just run away, right? So it's okay. So like, You tell your boss, the warden of the prison, I can't find this kid. Okay, maybe he did run away. Maybe it's an accident. 40 kids later,
Right.
you're like, so it wasn't just the guy that was beating and murdering the kid.
Right.
It was his supervisor. It was his supervisor's supervisor.
Right.
And who checked on these kids?
Multiple people have to know. Like anybody who's been into a facility knows that one cop can't lie and have someone disappear. Multiple people have to be involved in that. Records have to be covered up. Records have to be created.
Yep.
Oh no, he got to a point. We signed him every day, every roll call for 6 more months. Then he got released. We have to show his release papers. We have to show that he signed the release papers, that he was released with his stuff. Someone picked him up. Like all that has to be documented for him to be let go, for you to cover that up. And that can't be done by one guy.
Exactly. And then the state prison is overseen by other state employees. Right? The Inspector General office, I believe, is who does the overseeing of the prisons and stuff here in Florida. So somebody in that office would have to be compliant as well, right? Because they come to check on the prison. God, man, you got 40 kids missing here.
Yeah.
So
issue.
It's a corrupt system right from the get-go. Maybe they were doing some Jeffrey Epstein type stuff. Maybe high rollers from Tallahassee were rolling in for a little fun with the boys. There's no telling what was going on there.
You're saying that made you realize, like, what were you doing? Public records request, or did you just that? So when the articles came out and you started realizing, wow.
Well, that made me realize that the state needs help. The state needs help watching its employees because obviously it can't do the job itself, right?
Right.
Just like if I was to, let's say you ran a boys' home and you lost 40 kids, you're not the state, you're just a private contractor or something. But I would still look at that and say, Matt needs help, right? He lost 40 kids last year. He doesn't know where they went. He obviously needs help watching these kids. So I'm going to come out and I'm going to stand outside Matt's facility and I'm going to watch, and maybe I'll see a couple of kids hopping the fence and running away and, maybe able to help track them down or something like that. But the whole thing is the fact that the state, like I said, like the mafia, is ill-equipped to watch over itself. Right. So that was the takeaway I got from that.
So at what point did you decide, I'm going to start doing this? I mean, I understand you're saying that.
It was 2018, and my wife, she's not. I want to say involved. Most ladies are not as involved with rights, civil rights, and protecting our rights and stuff like that as men are. And you could tell that just from the viewership I get on my channel, which is about 90% male, 10% female. So she was weary, obviously.
Women are mostly non-confrontational, and you have to realize, hey, every time I go out, there's a damn good chance there's going to be a confrontation, and with someone in authority.
Exactly.
Which is really fucking, ballsy because...
And she's got high anxiety, so it really eats at her because every time I go out, she's just sitting at home on end thinking, is he going to get arrested? Is he going to get beat? Is he going to get shot?
Right.
So I waited until she and our daughters went on vacation up north, and I had a couple of weeks, and I picked up a camera. I said, let me try this out and let me see how it goes. And I did it for a couple of weeks while they were gone, and I got a good response. I did.
I was going to say, what typically happens?
What typically happens is that, you walk in and, regardless of what you're doing, I try to walk in and stay quiet. I'll walk around anywhere, post office, city hall. My first audit was Ocala City Hall. And I walked in and, they tried to tell me I wasn't allowed to be there and that sort of thing. But, I was. They gave me an escort around the facility after they told me that I wasn't allowed to be there. And I stood my ground. And, the guy from upstairs came down and was like, yeah, whatever. And so they followed me around or whatever. But, I try to go in. I try to be as quiet as possible. I'll look at stuff. And then when people come to me, that's when the confrontation begins. And usually people come up to me and they'll say, hey, you're not allowed to be in here filming. And, a lot of people enjoy my work because I'm pretty easygoing. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. You're okay. It'll be all right. You're okay. And they'll look at me and, no, really, you're not allowed to be in here. I'm like, no, it's cool. It'll be all right. And it pisses them off more,
right.
Because I'm so nonchalant about it, right? I'm not like, ooh, I'm just like, no, it's okay. And you don't have permission. I'm like, oh, I don't need permission. It's okay, and so it gets them kind of riled up. But, when my wife came back after vacation.
Do they typically call the cops, or do sometimes they just meander off?
Traditionally, I say about 40 to 50% of the facilities that I visit are what is called a pass, which they either leave me alone or they don't try to restrict my rights or they don't call the police. And I post some of those up online too, because I want to show the contrast. As a matter of fact, I was in Biloxi, Mississippi last year sometime, and I did their city hall, and they did such a great job. I ended up on the front page of the local newspaper out there, for the audit, and they loved it. And I tell people the only difference is the people's reaction to my camera, because I do the same audit wherever I go.
Right.
Walk in, view the facility, and it's just how people react to it that makes the video either a pass or a fail. And I get a good percentage of passes. Now, when I started down here in Florida, almost every place I went was an issue.
What year was this?
This was 2018,
okay.
late 2018. 2019 is really when I started picking up. So yeah, for most of the time I go out, there was an issue. Now, when I go out, I kid you not, I'll give you an example. I was in front of Osceola County Jail one time. I'm standing out there recording. Cop rolls down his window. How you doing, George? Do you have enough sunscreen on? What?
Right.
I'm like, okay, these guys, they know.
Yeah.
They know now. And I go back, I do revisits. Now, when I started, a lot of auditors, I'd say most auditors would never do revisits, right? And to me, I said to myself, if I don't go back to these places, I don't know if they've learned anything. Right. So in this community, I'm the king of revisits. I probably got more revisits than every other auditor combined, because I want to keep hitting them.
Right.
To me, it's always been like a puppy type thing where you want to rub their nose in the law so that they understand it, right? And the only way to do that is to keep going back and going back. And sometimes, like a Marion County courthouse, first 2 times I went there, got kicked out, got called sovereign citizen, got kicked out. The 3rd time I went there, cop walks into the part of the building where I'm at. He sees me, I'm recording. He goes, "Oh, you're just doing an audit?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Okay." Turns around and walks out. I never had to file a complaint.
Right.
Never had to file a lawsuit. The issue is that people don't know the law.
Right.
And they have these myths, "Oh, you can't take my picture. You need permission, blah, blah, blah."
Okay.
And right. And so when they see me, they think these things. And then I tell them, no, right? And then I leave. And then they go home at night and they're talking to their wife or they're talking to their husband or they're talking to a friend over a cup of coffee. This guy came into my office the other day. He's recording, and their buddy goes, "Oh, yeah, that's legal." Or maybe they're talking to their lawyer or cop buddy. "Oh, yeah, that's legal." And then education starts happening. People don't want information from me.
Right.
Right. That's why they call the cops, because the cops, when they do come there and they know the law, they tell them the exact same thing I do.
Yeah.
But people don't want to take my word for it, right? They need somebody in authority. Again, that's that school system coming in, right?
So real quick, what happened? You said the first time you did it, and then your wife came back.
My wife came back, and she was weary about me doing it. So
But you hadn't had any problems.
I hadn't had any issues up until that point. So I stopped. When she came back, I stopped for like, no.
Did you tell her what you did? Did you tell her?
Oh, yeah,
"Hey,
no, I told her what I was doing.
What did she say?
Again,
She knew when you left you were going to do this?
Yeah, she knew when she left I was going to do that. And when she got back, we talked about it. And again, she's weary. She's like, I don't want to, spend my life with a guy that's in and out of jail and, all this other stuff. And she's got a great point.
Yeah.
I'm almost 50 years old. I don't feel like I should be get in and out of jail either. But I told her, I said, this needs to be done. I said, this is really important to me, and she's finally like, okay, go ahead. And so she allowed me, you know, to continue what I was doing. And then from that point on, I just went balls to the wall. In 4 years, I put out more content than every other auditor you can think of out there. Like I consistently was putting out an audit a day, you know, 300-400 audits a year, where like Jeff Gray, who's been doing it 6 years longer than me, doesn't have half the audits that I do. So I'm a real hardcore work ethic kind of guy. I start at 8 a.m. when the government building's open, and I don't stop till 5. Sometimes I miss lunch. Sometimes I don't even eat dinner, because after 5, I hit all the places that aren't closed. Prisons, airports, county jails. You know, there's always places that aren't specifically closed at 5. Juvenile facilities, I'll roll by. So I'm real hardcore in as far as the work ethic goes. And, you know, I had a couple of arrests. I've had 4 total. 3 of them were dismissed. This last one was not.
Well, what happened with the first time you got arrested? What was
the first time I was arrested was in front of the Orange County Jail, 33rd Street, and it was right where they released the inmates out of. You know, so if you're getting released, would be where you're getting out of the little section. I didn't even go inside. I stood outside. I was filming inside the facility. And the sergeant had come out and, you know, hey, what are you doing? You got ID? And I was like, ID? I'm like, no, I don't have any ID. You know, I'm not giving you ID. And he says, well, you know, you're out here, you're recording the jail. I said, well, is that illegal? And he said, well, hold on. And then he goes back inside.
I'm not sure.
Right. He goes back inside, and while he's back inside, we walk around a little bit more, and then we walk back to where he is, and he called a couple of buddies, and his buddy Portico, I think his name was, comes up, and he asked my buddy. Now, the guy that I was with, this was his first time out at all. Okay, like totally his first time out at all, and he's talking to the cop, and the cop says, well, you know, you're being trespassed. And so I need your ID, which is not correct.
Right.
Okay. You know,
well, first of all, is it a cop or is it?
It's a sheriff's
deputy.
Sheriff's deputy. Yeah. So, he told him, he goes, I need ID. And, you know, my buddy goes, well, what crime do I commit? He goes, well, listen, I need your ID for the trespass, you being trespassed, which you don't need in Florida here. And he wouldn't give it to him, so he arrested him. And then they turned to me and they said, well, are you giving ID? And I said, no, I'm not giving ID. And they arrested me, and they put us both in. We spent the night in, and we got bonded out the next day. And I think it was like a week later, the charges ended up getting dropped. He had hired a lawyer, and she had filed a motion of discovery.
Who hired your buddy?
Yeah. His name was Charles. And he hired a lawyer, and she submitted a motion for discovery to see this evidence of wrongdoing, and they ended up dropping the charges. And that took about a week to do. Then my next arrest was at the.
I have a question. Do you file a complaint after that, or do you file a lawsuit and say?
We filed a lawsuit after that, and there was actually 2 lawsuits filed on that instance. And when I was outside being arrested, there was a sergeant from inside the facility that was outside watching it happen, and he knew I hadn't given ID. So after they arrested me, they transported me in there, and we're inside the processing facility, and they give me the blues, which were actually, I think, orange, you know, but the uniform they give you. Okay, go ahead and go in the room and change. I changed. I came back out. And the sergeant, who knew that I hadn't given ID, he says, well, what's your name? I said, well, you can call me Good Citizen. Well, he immediately came over, handcuffed me again, jerked my arms up behind my back, and then walked me into a cell. And in that cell, I sat for, I think, 13 hours before I was allowed to make my phone call or even get processed out. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, so we filed two lawsuits, one on the arrest and then one on the injury to my arm for when he jacked me up inside the facility. So yeah, we definitely, you know, anytime there's an arrest, I try to file a lawsuit if there's any way.
So what happens with those lawsuits? Like, do they do you take them all the way through? Do they come and they,
Usually they settle.
Okay.
Most times they settle. We haven't had to take one to trial yet.
Right. But they're settling for
a pittance.
Yeah, very little money, but it's still enough for them to realize we made a mistake.
Right.
This is the result of that mistake. It's not, we can't just arrest someone, hold them for a fucking week, let them go, drop the charges, and move on. No, he's gonna cause us some problems. There's gonna be a lawsuit. We're gonna have to pay out some money. We're gonna have to file paperwork. So now he's costing us, because that's really when you hit them in their pocketbooks. That's really when they go, okay, look, what are you doing? Now a lot of people are involved.
Yep.
Now the state attorney or the county attorney has to hear about it. Now it's like, well, why'd you do that? Why am I now addressing a motion or in a lawsuit and multiple motions when all you guys had to do was say, okay, cool.
Right.
And walk away. Like, he didn't break the law. We had to drop the charges. Now we're being sued.
And what's really interesting about that Orange County arrest is, if you remember the Casey Anthony trial,
right? Yeah.
When she was released, that's the exact same place that she was released where all the paparazzi were.
They didn't arrest any of those guys.
No. And you could tell.
Maybe they all provided ID. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's possibly.
They all had a little laminated ID.
The little press pass. So I made a great press pass in my first couple of years. What I did was I'd go to these public places and I'd take the pamphlets that they put in the lobbies.
Right.
And I'd cut them out to make them say what I'd want. And then I put it all into like a little press pass. I laminated it, and then I was so happy about it. So anytime they asked me for my press pass, I'd hand it to them. I said, look, you want to get a copy of that.
Right.
I said, that's the only press pass like that ever. I said, that is the only press pass approved and paid for by we the people. Right. And they didn't like that.
What was the one guy? One guy says he has a press pass or a pass that he gives them, an ID. One guy's got an ID that he gives them. I forget what it says though. It says something.
Well, Jeff Gray invented. He's such an innovator, but he started when they asked for ID. He goes, "Oh yeah, I got it in my pocket. Let me fish it out." And then he'd pull out the I and the D, the little kids magnets.
Right.
He goes, "There's my I and there's my D." And he get a chuckle out of them sometimes or whatever, but sometimes they wouldn't like it. But I always thought it was hilarious, but it's just more misconception.
What did your wife say when you got arrested the first time?
My wife was off the chain the first time I got arrested.
Was she upset with you?
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you the reason why. I didn't even tell her I was going out that day to audit, right? I didn't tell her where I was. She was calling like hospitals and jails all around Florida looking for me, So that was my bad. That was my mistake.
It's like mountain climbing. It's like rock climbing. You have to tell someone where you're going.
Exactly.
You can't switch it at the last minute. This is where I'll be. This is where to start the with they're going to look for me. This is where to start.
Yep. So now we've got that all squared away. She's got a tracking app on my phone. She can erase my phone remotely. Oh. So
now she knows. Now she can call Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department. Oh no, he's there.
Yeah.
He's there.
Absolutely.
He may not have been processed yet. He's there.
Exactly. But now I text her. I mean, at every stop, I text her. I say, "Listen, baby, she already knows what county I'm in." I said, "I'm going in to do my audit. I'll text you when I get out."
So it's a group activity. See, this is like date night. Kind of like date night.
It is.
I feel like she doesn't think that. But really, it's a bonding experience. She just doesn't. She doesn't see it like that. That's
right. But again, because most women don't care about civil rights and aspects like that, and I try to tell her how important it is for our kids. Especially in today's age. Like if my daughter's, running around doing a Musical.ly, or I guess it's TikTok now. It's not longer Musical.ly or whatever, but doing a TikTok or something. I don't want her getting harassed by cops or something because she's walking down the road filming, which I actually saw a video of a kid that was walking down the road filming a TikTok, and the police arrested him because the kid knew his rights too, which is surprising. He was 17 years old, but the kid knew his rights. He says, "I'm not giving you no ID because I didn't do anything wrong."
Right.
Well, the lady over here thinks you're recording her house.
Doesn't matter what she thinks.
Right. And
it's irrelevant.
They put him in the car. They drove him to his dad's house. The cops went out to talk to his dad. You know what his dad did? Picked out his phone, started recording. Pissed those cops off, dude. They were like, like father, like son, blah, blah, blah. And then they drove off with the kid, and he had to go get him or whatever. But it's like, what do you expect?
Right.
So
what happened with the second one?
The second arrest was at the Port of Tampa, where they do the Carnival cruise ships.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So as you go up to the terminal, they have the building or whatever. It's kind of like open air. There's stairs, and then you go upstairs, and then you go through this like line, and then you go into the building with the doors, and the inside is where the TSA checks your bags and everything before you get on the cruise. Now the upstairs is open to anybody. There's no ticket counter below. There's no gate. There's no ticket owners only signage or whatever. So we had went up there. And it was me and my buddy, and they didn't like it. Oh, you can't record here. I mean, they were really belligerent. They really wanted to arrest us. And
this is just the employees? No,
this was the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Reserve. They were reserve deputies, guys that were
volunteers.
I guess they're like retired or semi-retired.
Okay.
They're too old to be out there on the street, I guess, type of deal.
Right.
And so they stick them in these kind of positions, call them reserve deputies. And they were like, oh, yeah, you can't be here. We're going to get arrested, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't ready to get arrested that day. So I said, you know what? I said, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go ahead and leave, and I'll come back. And so I left. And about a week later, I call up my lawyer. And I told him, I said, Vince, I'm going to get arrested, buddy. And he says, okay, just tell me when and where, and I'll have some witnesses there for you. Perfect.
Nice.
So we go back home, and we pull every kind of document you can imagine. We pulled the contract with Carnival and the Port of Tampa. We pulled all the operational documents for the Port of Tampa. We pulled federal law as far as it was concerned, because a port is a federal entryway. So there's federal law that governs the ports. So we pulled all of that, right? And we printed it out.
So is it public? It
was public.
Okay.
It was public. And I had it all ready. I had it in my back pocket. And I told them, I said, we're going back this day. And so we went back, and it was me and my buddy, Dr. Sean Berry. Dr. Sean Berry, I believe at the time, was in his mid-50s. He'd never been arrested in his life. The man holds 3 PhDs, right? So we go up there, and one of the same guys is there, and he comes to me and goes, no, you guys can't be up here. I said, no, listen, I said, I have everything right here in my pocket. I said, we're totally allowed to be here. I didn't realize it at the time, but my lawyer was sitting like 20 feet away with like 3 other lawyers watching this whole thing go down. And he goes, well, you're not allowed to be here. I said, listen, I says, I'm going to stay here. I said, if you guys have to arrest me, I said, that's fine. You know what I mean? The cop actually, the deputy said it was the nicest arrest he's ever had. Nice. So we told him, I said, we're not leaving. This is it. This is what it is. So they arrested us, and I finally realized my lawyer was there, because as I was being arrested, I hear, George, it's okay. We're gonna bond you out. And I look around. There's my lawyer. I'm like, yes. So we go Hillsborough. We get bonded out a couple hours. Me and Doc. And my lawyer, he handles both of our criminal cases, and he handles the civil case. Now we're on an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, for the civil case as far as that goes. So I can't say if we won or lost or whatever. But the outcome was satisfactory to me. So, but it amazed me. My lawyer, a funny story, he contacted me. I didn't contact him.
Right.
I was doing a live stream one day out in front of the Oriental Road Jail, which is in Tampa. They got 2 jails. One's
Orient
Road, yeah. Orient Road. So I was out there. I was doing a live stream, and I was like, I need to get down to Punta Gorda, because they're a hotbed of tyranny down in Punta Gorda. I said, I need to get down there. I said, but I need about $700 to get down there. This guy pops up in chat. He goes, give me a call. He goes, I'll pay for the whole thing. I'm like, wow, who is this guy? So I get in touch with him. He's a lawyer. He says, I'm going to give you $750. All I want from you is to advertise my law firm underneath your videos.
That's awesome.
And I'll handle any criminal cases that come to you in Florida, because he's a Florida lawyer. I was like, man, that's a great deal. And that we've had a working relationship now for the last 3 or 4 years. Now he's retired, but any legal questions I have, I got his text, I got his phone number, his email. He's always responsive to me, and he loves what I do. You know, he's got issues with cops himself. You know,
Right.
and so he understands it. But yeah, he totally reached out to me and offered me help and advice. So I was pretty thankful for that. You know, that really helped me out early on.
So how long on the second one did you sit in jail? Or
It
did
was
you
like
get bond
4 or
out?
5 hours.
Oh,
It wasn't long at all, because like I said, he's a lawyer. He's got the bond money.
Yeah,
Bam, he's right there. Plus, it helped that he knew the DA that was charging me, so that kind of helped it speed along. But they took forever to dismiss those charges. It was literally like a year before they dismissed those charges.
Did you ever visit them?
No. Other people had revisited them. So when I started auditing, there were like 3 or 4 people in the state of Florida that were auditing.
Right.
Now there's probably about 50
Right.
people that do audits in Florida now. So what happened is after I'd done pretty much all of Florida, and I got my camera here, or my thing here, and you guys might want to take a shot of this to put on your video, but I'm going to show you, this is a map of everywhere I've been since COVID started. I put little dots on the map.
Is that an iPhone?
Huh?
Is that an iPhone?
No, this is a Motorola.
I was gonna say you could airdrop it,
So
or you could screenshot it and send it to me.
yeah. So what happens is once I got through Florida pretty much, and they were complying for the most part, I said now it's time for me to branch out. So that is,
you've been all over, huh?
that's everywhere I've been, and as you get closer here, you can see.
Oh yeah, there's way more. Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just.
Yeah, each one of these little flags that he has, as you get closer, it becomes 4, 5, 6, 7 different flags. So it's not just like
No.
there's hundreds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just Florida.
Yeah, just send it. You can screenshot that. And send
Yeah,
it.
screenshot a couple different spots and send it to me, like the whole thing, and then a couple different ones. And
Yeah,
send it to me.
absolutely.
And like this won't come out for a while.
Yeah. So
I was gonna say, ask a question real quick. What are you doing with the camera? Like, are you just have like a gimbal that you're holding, or are you just holding your camera, or do you have it actually on a body?
I have multiple cameras. When I started with a $200 camera from Walmart, one of those handheld Sonys,
Right.
the flip open thing. Then I, because you're shaky, especially when you're new and you're, surrounded by 5 cops. It's an adrenaline dump, you know?
Of course.
So I got what is called a C stabilizer. It's like a C, it looks like a C, and then the camera goes on the bottom and then on the top. So after I had that, I bought a 360 camera and I put that on top. And now my rig, it's changed over the years. I bought a $1,500 Sony camera, and that was confiscated within 3 months by Paulding County when they arrested me. It's been over 2 years. I still haven't got that camera back. And so now I'm using the LG Wing phone. I use that. I use a 360 camera. I use a body camera as well, one that goes on. I do have a GoPro. The problem I found with GoPro is that they overheat. There's only about an hour time of recording.
Right.
And also,
If you've got 3 different ones going.
Right. So
Yeah,
it doesn't matter. And then one other issue I had, which I didn't realize until I was in the middle of an audit, was my GoPro 7 is voice activated. So once it's powered on, I could say GoPro start recording,
Right.
GoPro stop recording. Well, one day I'm in the middle of an audit, and this lady says, "You need to stop recording." Beep, beep, beep. There goes my there goes my GoPro. I'm like, "You're out." I can't use you no more.
Right.
So I stopped using that, and one of my subscribers bought me I think the name of the thing is Bob Love, and it's a great body cam. It goes about 8 hours, has about 8 hours recording time, and It's never failed me. It's not voice activated. I turn it on when I'm ready, and I turn it off when I'm ready, and it's worked wonders for me. The body cam, even the GoPro, when I did use it, saved my ass.
Right.
Yeah, because one time in Dothan, one of the lawsuits I'm involved in right now, they had handcuffed me and my buddy, whose name is Bad Cop No Donut, and they handcuffed us, and they made us sit down. They took my recording equipment, but I still had my GoPro on, so I was like, GoPro, start recording. And we sat there for about an hour. The GoPro caught it all, and it's instrumental in my case right now.
Right.
Because they illegally searched us and such like that. But yeah, I mean, I advocate for as many cameras as possible. I mean,
what I was going to say was that it's funny, you say that, I'm auditing I'm doing a First Amendment audit, that I'm auditing them. And so I think that there's like a misconception on a lot of things that are out there. For example, like if you want to be licensed by the state, right? So I want to be licensed by the state to, let's say to do mortgages, like, right? So I want to be a licensed mortgage broker. I want to be a licensed brokerage business, or a bank or a credit union. Like, those are all things that the state licenses you for.
right.
But there's all types of organizations out there that are private organizations that certify you and license you for things that the state and federal, the county, state, and federal governments don't cover, right? Because they just can't cover everything.
Right.
So, for instance, I do keynote speaking, and some of these organizations that I do keynote speaking for, like the Association of Certified Financial Examiners, they offer certifications. Like, this isn't a government body. This is a company that was created that said, look, we need to come up with curriculum and certifications for people, for there to be a standard,
Right.
For financial examiners. And it's the same thing. You have the same type of organizations that do those same types of things for what do they call it? For penetration specialists, right? For hackers.
Right.
You have the same type. So there's lots of these different types of organizations that govern a specific organization or industry that are completely unrelated. And yet the government will go to them and say, hey, who do you have that can help us do this? Or, hey, we'd like to send some of our FBI agents to the local organization and have them go through your course and get certified. So now you're an FBI agent asking, you're the Federal Bureau of Investigation asking for this public or this private company to certify your FBI agents to do, certified audits of, books or, companies or whatever. And those aren't, so to me, some of these organizations, and some of them might come and they might never go anywhere. And some of them have been around for 20, 30 years and they end up working with the government. So to me, the fact that you're saying, oh, well, I'm doing an audit, but it's just like you're saying, who else is going to audit them? The government's going to audit the government. You can't, you know what I'm saying? You
Can't trust that.
Right. You cannot proofread your own work.
Right.
I know as a writer, if I write 5 paragraphs and then I read it to try and proofread it, I'm not going to catch my own mistakes. I'm the one that made the mistakes.
Right.
So, I mean, I think that you ought to think about kind of doing like a whole certification, like actually certifying people to do this.
We've thought about in the community trying to get some kind of standards,
right?
To where we could weed out some of the guys that are
knuckleheads,
right? But and I don't want to say unfortunate because it's not unfortunate, but we're all under the independent journalist label,
right?
And there is no certification. It's hard because this isn't a thing that we can do. This is a right, and no one should be able to tell someone else how to express their right. It'd be like free speech advocates telling Westboro Baptist Church how they should perform their protests, right? 'Cause nobody likes Westboro Baptist Church, right? Their protests or whatever against soldiers and what have you. Not most Americans don't agree with them, but we all agree that
They have the right.
they have the right, and we need to fight to make sure they have that right and to keep that right. Even though if what they say is totally disgusting to us, we still need to understand they have that right. And it's the same thing with the independent journalists. Like, I don't like how these guys are out there, some guys are out there like literally watching people at restaurants, outdoor cafes, just
Right.
and I don't care for that. And it's totally detrimental to my movement.
Yeah.
But in a sense, he's not doing anything wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? So even though I'd like to be like, hey, we don't like that and you shouldn't do that, at the end of the day, he's going to do it anyway regardless. There's nothing we can do to stop him, and that's his right to do that. So
I was going to say, who does that? Who does the certification thing? What was the woman, I forget her name, that does the crime cleanup? Remember that?
We look at her almost every episode.
Yeah, I keep going back. I don't know why I've gone back to her a few times. She started a whole crime clean, after people commit suicide or die, like the families are like, okay, well, I've got a dead body and there's all kinds of stuff left over after my grandfather committed suicide. Like, who's going to clean this up? Like, I don't want to do it. You shouldn't have to do it. And they're like, is there somebody I can contact? And so she started a company that started doing that. And then she started branching out. And then she started like certifying people. Like, you have to go through a whole course just to do this in order for me to buy like she's doing, what is it when you do franchising? Yeah, but she makes them.
Laura Spalding is her name.
Yeah, Laura Spalding, but she makes you get certified and the whole thing. But it's also kind of like a business opportunity thing for her too. So, but yeah, I get that. It always kills me when the cops say, well, do you have your press credentials? Like, what press? Like, well, you press. Well, who are you? Well, who would license me as press?
But that's one of my favorite comebacks is when they say, well, do you have press credentials?
Who issues that?
Yeah, who issues that? If you could tell me who issues that, I'll provide them.
Right.
And they're like, oh, and then I go, the press hasn't been licensed since 1662 in England under the Licensing Act.
Right.
They've never been licensed in America. I said there's not one federal or state law that licenses journalists.
Right.
So,
because it gives you the ability to limit the licensing.
Exactly.
Now that's that asshole so-and-so. We don't like him. Don't license him. Like,
Exactly.
it's like getting a license to vote.
Right. Or a license for free speech.
Yeah, you have to take a test.
Yeah.
Wait a minute now.
Yeah. One of my buddies, he uses that. He goes, I'll show you my license for the free press when you show me your license to practice free religion.
Right.
So, and that always miss them,
So what was the next time you got arrested? The third. There was the third, and I know the last one.
The third time was out in what's the name of that town? It's right by Mobile. I can't remember the name of the town now. It's a little small town.
Birmingham? No.
It's by Mobile. Hold on, I'll be able to tell you right away. And what's funny
you
is
have a little flag next time.
I do because I visited it. But Pritchard, Alabama. And that place is a hellhole.
What?
It literally, people around Mobile, Alabama, when you ask where do I not want to go,
Right.
Pritchard, Alabama is where you don't want to go.
And so you said that's where we'll start.
That's always the way I am. When people call me up and they say, "Hey man, these people are tyrants. You won't get out of there without getting arrested." I'm like, "Where's this again? How long is it going to take me to get there?" That's where I want to be, right? Because it's the same thing of like when people are like, "Well, the cops never mess with me."
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. The cops never mess with people that comply with their unlawful orders.
Right.
That's a given.
I always comply.
Yeah.
I'm very polite when they say ID. But I told this to my wife the other day. I said, it kills me when these guys won't give them their ID. I said, because I'll give my ID to anybody. And I go, it's not just the police. I said, do you understand that if we were walking down the mall and someone just walked up to me and said, "Hey bro, excuse me, do you have ID? Can I see your ID?" I'd be like, "Yeah, what's up?" I just immediately would do it. I would be like, "Yeah, why? What's going on?" "Okay." And even walked off, I'd be like, "Hey, wait a second." But I just instinctively would probably do it. Not even thinking he's demanding it, just because I'm very, happy go lucky. Yeah, I'm just kind of a goof. I'm not thinking you're trying, first of all, you can't, I don't know what you could do with my ID anyway, but, and I steal people's identity. So, I'm pretty I probably I can get the information online without ever talking to you. But
Right.
So, but I just naturally am a compliant person that's, pretty, just go along with whatever. I wouldn't be thinking anything really. So when the cops ask, I'm always like, sure, no problem.
Most people are.
Right. But I also don't feel like we said, I also don't feel I have anything to hide. And I'm not thinking they're demanding it. I think if I was in another situation, it bothers me. It's funny because so if you ask me to do something, I have no problem doing it. It's when people start demanding, that's when I get, all right, well, had you asked me nicely, that's one thing. I'd give anybody, if they ask me nicely, somebody walks up and, yo, bro, let me see your ID. Then it would be like, the fuck are you, bro?
Right.
But if you'd walked up and said, hey, man, can I see your ID? Do you have ID? What's your name? Oh, my name is Matt. Oh, my name's Joe. What's up? Hey, can I see your ID? Sure. Like, I would probably be pulling my wallet out before I even said, well, why? What is this about? You still probably have my ID before you even told me what it was about. Mm-hmm. But if you walked up and you were a prick, I don't think I'd give you my ID.
Well, and what you just said there is important, because what happened and what has happened is that because Americans have nothing to hide, most Americans, and they feel like, I should obey authority. When the police come up and they ask them for ID, they're, oh yeah, let me give you that ID. They're in a rush to prove that nothing's wrong, that they didn't do anything wrong, and everything's fine. And what has happened over time is because there's been no resistance there, then the police get it in their mind, oh, I can ask anybody for ID.
Right.
I mean, if you watch 10 of my videos and 9 of them, cops are telling you, like straight up telling you, in this state, if an officer asks you for ID, you must provide it.
Right.
And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
There's no law anywhere that says that.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, you don't have to have a license or an ID in any state. All you need to do is provide your name and date of birth. You don't have to have a license.
Right.
Unless you're driving a motor vehicle.
Right.
So
you went to,
Pritchard, Alabama.
Pritchard.
And outside of Pritchard, or in Pritchard, there's it's a work release facility. And I was standing on the easement, the public right of way, right next to the road. And I'm recording.
This is the third one.
It's the third arrest.
Okay.
Lady comes out and, she's, oh, you can't record here,
Who's with you, by the way? Just you?
This is me, just by myself.
Oh.
I've done about half my audits by myself. I'm comfortable either way.
Right.
With people or without people. But I was with somebody at this time, or nobody at this time. Lady comes out, you can't record here. Same old. Yeah. I'm allowed to record here. I'll be fine, blah, blah, blah. Well, they call the cops. The cops show up. I'm talking with one, for a couple of minutes. Then the second one rolls up. And again, it's like, you need to provide ID and such and like that. And I was in the middle of providing my information. I said, okay. I'll provide information. I give him my name, George. And then the officer over here says, well, where do you live? I said, well, that's not important. And that's not required by law.
Right. Now
I'm going to jail. Boom, boom.
Just like that?
Just like that, like that quick. And all this is online. You can check it out, but it's all online. And right in the middle of it. And I couldn't believe it. And they locked me up. They put me in the car. They took me in. And it took me a couple hours to get out. I have a buddy that lives right around Bad Cop, No
What
Donut.
are they saying?
I don't even remember what the charges were on that one. I think it was trespassing, and I don't know if it was obstruction or whatever.
Do you bring an ID?
No.
Oh, so when you say I don't have ID, I don't have ID.
No, because again, they're known to like pat you down and search you and stuff like that. So I don't want to do that and involuntary give it up. So I'd never bring my ID. I leave it in the car. And car's parked down the road.
You have a dummy wallet that when you open it up, it says, "Why are you looking through my wallet?"
Listen, you want to know something funny? I do have a dummy wallet.
Okay.
I call it the bait wallet.
Right.
Okay. So what I did was I went out and I bought a man purse. Right. It's a Top Gun volleyball tournament man purse, right? And it's got a little pocket outside of it. And I stuffed the wallet in there. So it's completely visible, right? So when the officer's like, you got an ID? I'm like, no.
He goes,
What's that? I said, well, that's my bait wallet. That's for criminals only. And I haven't had an officer reach for it yet. But if they were to reach for it, when you pull out the wallet, right on the front of the wallet, it says, F you, the words. Then when you open up the wallet and you see the ID, it's for McLovin.
Right.
His Hawaii license.
You should have one that when you open the wallet, it has a high pitch. Something like a shot, one of those shock things, like,
That would be funny. But, okay, so back to Pritchard.
Seems like you get arrested a lot quicker that way, but yeah.
Yeah, so they took me and they booked me. I paid my bond and I got out. Now, Pritchard is an economically depressed area. When we were looking at bond, you could do bond two ways. You can go through a bond company or you can submit the money to the court itself in a full to bond you out, and that way you don't have to pay the 10% to the bondsman. Well, the people that I knew in that area said, listen, he goes, you don't want to pay the bond to Pritchard. You'll never see that money again.
Right.
And I was like, really? They're in such dire straits. And when you drive through the town, you could see it. Like I told the cop when we were driving through, I was looking around at the buildings. I said, it don't look like you guys can afford a lawsuit.
Right.
You
sure you want to do this?
Right. So, I got bonded out, and it took, I don't know, I'd say 3 or 4 months before my trial.
How much was the bond?
I'd say $1,000, somewhere around there.
Did you pay the whole $1,000?
No, we paid a bondsman.
Okay.
But since I was out of state, I ended up paying a little bit more than $100. I think it was like $500 or whatever. That's standard when you're out of state, I guess, at least in my instances when I've been arrested out of state. But so I paid that, and about 3 or 4 months later was my trial. And at the day of the trial, they dismissed the charges on a technicality. I'm assuming the technicality was that I was innocent,
Right.
but whatever they want to do, whatever they want to say. Now, on that one, I didn't file a lawsuit. And the reason being is because I thought there would be no chance of recovery even if I did win. Because they're very, like I said, very depressed economically. There was just a story not long after this happened where the lady that ran the water department there was busted for stealing $400,000. And they did a whole raid on her house. It's all on the news and stuff. It's crazy. But I like to spend my time accordingly and my resources where I think they'll do the most help. So after that happened, I invoked a couple of people to come with me. So I had a guy fly out from California. I had 2 guys drive in from Texas, and me and 1, 2, 3 other guys drove in from Florida to Pritchard, Alabama. And we all stood out on that same easement. This is before the trial. Well, two of my buddies ended up getting arrested there as well. Right. And so they've taken their court, to trial and everything, and they're not facing charges anymore either.
They dropped those too?
Yeah. They
Technicality?
they worked out some kind of thing where they wouldn't come back for like a year or something like that. It wasn't like
come back in the town for a year.
Yeah, it was
totally unenforceable.
Yeah, it was like whatever. So they did that because what happened was they would set a court date. And then my buddy would fly from California into Texas and then drive over to Alabama with the other guy. And they would get there. Oh, it's postponed. And they do it like 3 or 4 times. My buddy's like, I can't afford to keep flying back and forth and doing all this stuff. He's just
they're trying to wear you down. Yeah.
Right. So they did that. But in that return trip, we had numerous revisits and that we did that day, and a total of 3 guys ended up getting arrested that day. One guy got arrested at our first spot we revisited, which was a police department there, and he got arrested there. And then so while he was getting booked in, we went down the road to the airport. We did a audit there, and then we found out what his bond was, so we went and we bonded him out. Then we went back to Pritchard where the other 2 guys got arrested. We went back to the county jail to pick up the first guy we bonded out. And then we went and did some more audits. And then later that night, we went back and we picked up the 2 other guys that were arrested. And that was our day. So pretty exciting stuff.
This is an interesting club.
Yeah. Yeah.
Vastly different than most.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's all shapes and sizes, and and education levels and careers and colors. You know, a lot of people when I started were like, oh yeah, that's white privilege. You know, you do that because you're white. And I'm like, have you not seen my boy
I was gonna say we need a black guy.
Big Nick, South Florida accountability? Oh, big Nick don't play, baby. Like he goes hard. Big Nick, South Florida accountability. And I tell him, I said, listen, when you know your rights, it doesn't matter what color you are.
Right.
You know, and it's true. I mean, Big Nick and there's others, you know, that hold him to the fire. I got my boy Eli in New York City. And he holds him to the fire, you know. And
Eli Hispanic or
he's mixed, I believe, but
definitely not a white guy.
Definitely not a white guy. And you know, the way he talks, I want to say he's, you know, Jamaican or Dominican or something, but I don't know. You know, I've never really asked him because it never really mattered to me. You know, what race or what color. You know what I mean? He came to me. Eli came to me years ago before he started auditing, and he does hip hop.
Okay.
And he wrote a couple of songs about the community. And one of the songs he wrote, I was in the lyrics. And
nice.
A couple of my other buddies were in the lyrics. And the name of the song's Cop Watch. And so I played.
That should be the name of a channel.
Yeah. I played his music on some of my videos. Like on some of my Best of Rogue Nation videos, I use his song as my intros. And he picked up a camera and he started doing it, and he's been doing great up there as well. You know, New York City is just, you know, when you got an organization of 17,000 people, it's just logical that there's going to be corruption and grift and stuff like that going on. It's just too big of an organization not to be doing, you know, somebody doing that. And in New York City specifically, they have a policy against recording inside the precincts. And that's what all the guys are up there challenging now. So they've had about 3 or 4 arrests of guys going in like me and challenging the ordinance. And we're getting court cases brought up now to challenge that. So, you know, that's basically, you know, what it's about is just holding people responsible and digging into where the mainstream media isn't digging in, you know.
So what happened with the third or with your fourth arrest, with this last arrest?
My fourth arrest, again, by myself. I was up in Paulding County, Georgia, and which is just west of Atlanta. And it was really strange because I wasn't planning on auditing where I ended up that day. I was in the town a little south of there. I can't remember the name. I want to say Douglasville, but I could be wrong.
There is a Douglasville.
Is there?
I know.
It could have been that. But I was in the town, and I was planning on auditing there. But when I woke up the next morning, I was looking at my tried and true map, and I noticed that there was an area that had like 3 or 4 detention centers, like a jail, a detention center, and that. So I was like, man, that would be a great spot to start my day off. So I drove up there. I parked on the side of the road in front of the 911 call center, but on the public right of way. I walked down to the prison, got in the parking lot, started recording. It was in December, so it was cold. It was kind of rainy. I had an umbrella, no gloves on. And, you know, I walked in, I started recording. The guys came out, you know, you're not allowed to be here. This is state property. You're not allowed to record him. Oh, no, I'm okay, you know, whatever. And, you know, okay, well, we're going to call the county sheriffs or whatever. I'm like, yeah, no problem. And
do they have any idea? Like, are they just, it's so foreign to them? That...
It is. Most people think that government property is private property or you can't be there. You know what I mean? Like they don't understand public at all and what's allowed and where you're allowed to be or whatever. So he was like, yeah, we're going to just call the county sheriffs or whatever. And I'm like, all right, you know, no problem. And I put one of my hands in my pocket because I was cold. You know, I didn't have gloves on. Can you take your hands out of your pocket? I was like, hell no, I ain't taking my hands out of my pocket. It's cold. Well, that's the obstruction charge they ended up hitting me with. But I'll get to that in a second. So I was like, yeah, whatever. And, you know, I'm walking around the parking lot. First cop pulls up. It's a guy and a lady. I don't know if they're deputies, Paulding County. And I don't know if she was being trained or if she was an actual deputy. But she didn't say much or do much. But I'm talking with the deputy back and forth here and there. And, you know, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm just recording. You know, he go, well, are you done? I said, no. I said, I just got here. I said, then these guys started freaking out. You know, I said, I know that this is a public parking lot. It's got a freaking sign right on the gate that says visitors.
Right.
You know what I mean? So people park here and they come in to visit people. So I know it's not restricted, no access signs, none of that. And he goes, he says something, and he goes, and it came to it to where he said, you know, am I detained? He said, no. And he goes, you know, you're free to leave. I says, well, I'm free to stay also. Oh, well, you're just here to cause a problem and cause you know, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as he said that, another deputy pulls up, gets out of his car, starts walking towards us. And this deputy asked this deputy, has he been asked to leave? And this deputy says, yeah, he's been asked multiple times, but he says this is public property, so he don't need to leave. And the officer walking up says, this is a correctional facility. And this guy goes, that's right. And so this officer gets in there and he goes, this is a correctional facility. Do you want to leave now? I said, what do you mean correctional facility? He goes, this is a correctional facility. So right now, boop, boop, you're under arrest. Takes and sets my camera down, literally rips my umbrella out of my hand, and then puts me in front of the car. They think they got me for trespass right now. So I'm in front of the car. He gets my name. He goes, well, what's your address? Where do you live? I says, well, I'm not legally required to give you that. It's not required by the state statute. Well, that's fine. I'll just put an obstruction charge on you. I says, well, do what you got to do. I says, I know I'll beat that in court. So what they did was after they got me arrested, they put me in the county jail. They changed the trespassing to loitering near inmates, which is a felony. Again, a statute that hadn't hardly, if ever, been used in 100 years. Me and my lawyer believe it's part of the chain gang statutes. And then they took the obstruction charge from the cop that said he was going to give it to me and gave it to the director of the facility because I didn't remove my hands out of my pocket. And then they prosecuted me for it. It took a little over 2 years for my case to come to court. Meanwhile, they kept my camera, which they didn't need to keep my camera because A, they never signed a warrant to get any of the video footage off the camera, right? So it was no good to them. 2, they never used the video camera in court in trial. You know, they didn't use it. They didn't bring it up. They didn't show it, nothing. And then after the court cases, you know, I'm convicted and everything else like that, we tried to get my camera back and they said, no, well, he's appealing. So we're going to keep this for the appeals process, knowing that you can't introduce new evidence in appeals. And there's no evidence on there that isn't already in the record. Right. Because I took the video from the camera. I petitioned the court to, you know, because obviously this is going to not convict me, right? It shows I'm now doing nothing. There's no inmates. So the video's already out there. There's no reason to keep my camera except to punish me for not doing what they said. Yeah.
So how long was the trial?
The trial took about a week.
A week?
Yeah, it took about a week. We started, we had to pick the jury, you know, so that took like a day or two. And then the trial, you know, the witnesses and stuff like that. So, I mean, I smoked them when I got on the witness stand. I mean, I really put it to her because, you know, she's, you know, trying to create this narrative. She's like, you really hate all cops, don't you? You really hate the government. And I said, no, ma'am. I says, I hate bad police. I said, I think we would all agree that bad police are not needed. Wouldn't you agree, ma'am? Oh, she didn't like that because she had to agree. Right. You know, so, but in the end, what happened was they had a panel of bootlickers and she got on there. There's a couple things that happened. One, she used evidence she wasn't allowed to use, right? We talked with the judge and said, this evidence is allowable. This isn't allowable. Right. Well, she showed the evidence that wasn't allowable anyway. And then, I made a mistake. Mm-hmm. Yeah, forget you saw that, you know? And then at the end, in closing arguments, state gets the last word and we can't rebut it. Right. So she gets up there and do we really want this guy from Florida coming up in our neighborhood harassing our neighbors? Well, what more do you need to say? Right. You know what I mean? Like, of course nobody wants that, right? They want to punish me because here I am, a Florida guy coming up to Georgia and I'm harassing their neighbors, you know, when really there was no harassing at all. Right. You know, so it's all about narratives with these folks and how they get spin it to make themselves look the best and whatnot. But I'm pretty sure on appeals we'll be able to beat it. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why is that there's a case up there. It's a civil case called Cox Communications versus Lowe, and it went to the Georgia Appeals Court in 1985. And there was a reporter who was in the prison parking lot filming the prison.
Right.
And he caught an inmate on camera, and the inmate filed a invasion of privacy lawsuit against him, which was dismissed because the judge said there's no information that he could get on the camera that's not already publicly available, right? Like, people know that you're convicted. They know your crime. It's in the news.
Right.
So there's nothing that he could get that would be an invasion of your privacy. But in that case, he specifically said that where the reporter is public.
Right.
And he was allowed to be there. So I should have been allowed to be in the parking lot where I was allowed to be. So we got pretty high hopes on the appeals. But, I mean, again, it's a corrupt system. So I tell people, don't take the arrest. If you can do anything, don't take the arrest, because you can document violations of civil rights, and I have, without getting arrested. Matter of fact, all 3 lawsuits I have in Alabama right now are for incidents where I was not arrested, and I'm doing them all pro se.
Right.
So, it's not something that needs to happen as far as that goes. And again, they violate rights literally every day. I mean, today, right now, as we're talking, this moment, someone's having their rights violated.
Right.
So,
well, I have a question. What your probation officer in Georgia? What is he saying?
Well, I had to transfer probation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Because I live down here.
Right.
So they transferred my probation to Marion County.
What's your probation officer down here say?
I mean,
is he like, this is silly?
Well, it's a she.
Okay.
And this is the first. I said, have you ever had a journalist on probation? No, this is the first time.
Right.
So they're weary because I asked them, I says, if a cop comes up to me and asks me for my ID, I said, do I have to provide that to him since I'm on probation? Well, not really. It's a Fourth Amendment type deal. You know what I mean? And I'm like, exactly. But the funny part of the whole thing is that 6 months before I got put on probation, I was at that probation office doing an audit.
Right.
I actually audited my probation officer's supervisor. Right. So when I'm in the office doing my probation, I'm looking at this guy. I'm like, didn't I audit you? Oh, yeah. They did a wonderful job when I was there. So that kind of eased the tension. But I just found it humorous that this probation office I was assigned to, which I just audited a while back. So, but they seem okay with it. I need permission to go out of the county every time I'm on felony probation. Yeah. So like I had to get permission to come here today. I submitted my list for this week. I'm covering a trial in Orlando. I'm covering a trial in Hernando County. I'm covering a council meeting tomorrow night in Sumter County. So I got to get permission to go out and do all that stuff. But
does all of that stuff end up on your channel, or you cherry pick? You go somewhere, you're like, there was just nothing interesting here, or you edit it down? Yeah,
I try to put as much as I can. Like if I'm going to spend time to go somewhere, like for the trial, that'll definitely be on the channel. For the county meeting, that should probably be on the channel. I don't try to just put bad stuff or gotcha moments or whatever. I try to put, what I can on there. But because I'm on probation and because of the fact that it would just take an arrest, not a conviction, to violate my probation, which would possibly get me an automatic 2-year sentence. The judge can automatically give me 2 years because my sentence could have been 1 to 5 years, it's because of felony.
Right.
And he gave me 3 years probation. But if I violate that probation, he can stick me right back into jail 2 or 3 years, and we wouldn't have to go to court over it or nothing. So it's restricted my auditing activities. So that's why I haven't been putting a lot of my own material out on my channel. It's too big of a risk. I'm the only earner for the family.
Right.
So if I was to go to jail for 2 years, I'd lose my house, I'd lose my wife, I'd lose my kids, I'd lose my car, I'd lose everything.
Right.
I'd get back out, I'd be homeless. And
so what are you putting on the channel now?
I'm putting stories. I do voiceovers on news stories or other people's videos that I see that are along the same lines of what I do, or I think that would be topics of interest to my subscribers. Anything dealing with government overreach or corruption, anything of that nature. Like, for example, the Sumter County meeting tomorrow night, the commission is trying to pass a new fire fee, and supposedly on one business, it's going to raise their fire fee tax like 140,000%, like stupid amounts of money. So, people want to know about stuff like that. I put lawsuit information on my channel because my lawsuits are still ongoing. Just stuff like that, stuff that would interest them.
Okay.
Public records requests, that kind of stuff.
What do you use to edit your stuff?
I use a program called VideoPad Pro. And I do my own editing. It's nothing fancy, I just clip here and clip there, and that's about it. I try to keep it as basic as I can. I don't want people thinking that I'm editing out, important information. Like a couple of the guys in the community, they like to go around and like act suspicious, like duck behind cars and, do all that kinds of stuff and get the police interested in what they're doing. But I don't like to do any of that, and I don't want to be accused of, he's editing his videos, so we don't really know if he's slapping the cop before the cop arrests him or what, which is another reason why I got my 360 camera, which was the best piece of advice I could give to anybody that wants to get into auditing, is the 360 camera, because that leaves no doubt about what's transpiring around you. You know what I mean? So I was up in Panama City at their city hall a couple years ago. And the video is titled When a Good Cop Goes Bad. And I had these two officers that approached me, and they knew it was legal for me to be there. They weren't trying to kick me out or anything, but they stood on each side of me and just belittled me and ridiculed me and tried to poke at me to get me to do something or say something, which I didn't do. And after they followed me around for about 20 minutes, I was in a spot, and I was looking one way, right? And the cop doesn't know that it's a 360 camera.
Right.
So he puts his leg behind my leg, and then he hip checks me, right? And I don't see it because I'm facing this way, and he's behind me. And he's like, "Don't you bump into me again, boy." And I'm like, damn. I'm like, I need to get out of here. These guys are getting a little irate,
that
Like I thought I'd bumped into him. I was like, "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to bump into you."
Right.
"Don't bump into me again, boy." I was like, okay, these guys
seems like a lawsuit right there.
Yeah, I was like, this guy's a little bit out of control. I said, I'm going to get out of here. Plus, I'd been there for like an hour. I'm like, almost every one of my batteries on my cameras were dead. I was like, if I don't have a camera going, I don't have no proof. So I got out of there. I got home. I'm sitting there. I told my wife, I said, "Baby," I said, "sit down here and watch this 360 camera with me." I said, I think something transpired here. And sure enough, I had to angle it just right. But you could see him. You could see him put his leg behind mine and boop, do that little hip check on me. And I was like, God damn it, that little bastard. But without that 360 camera, I mean, if he would have pushed the issue, that could have been a battery on law enforcement officer. I mean, that could have been the mandatory 5 years, especially in Florida with my already, criminal record down here from a kid. So, I mean, that really saved my ass there. Not that he did anything, but if he would have, that really would have saved my ass. So I tell people, one of the best pieces of advice I can give to people out there trying to do this is get a camera that sees everything.
Right.
Because they're not above doing something. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, cops will never do nothing like that." I've actually got it on film, so it's not an issue of if they would, if the opportunity arises, would they do something like that? And absolutely.
How long before you think the appeal is?
In Georgia, they have a year to a year and a half to hear the appeal. I think it has to be done within a year and a half. Now, what we're waiting on right now is we're waiting on the transcripts. So my lawyer's waiting for them to transcribe the record. Then he'll go through the record and he'll find, whatever he needs to find for the appeal. But the process in Georgia is that you have to file a motion for a new trial, right? So we filed that, and then once we get the transcript, they'll hear that motion, which most likely they'll deny, and then we can file for the appeal. Then that'll take a year to a year and a half. So I'm looking at about 2 years spending on probation, waiting for my appeals to go through. Now, if we went on the appeal, we're definitely going to try to sue. There's so many things messed up with it. Like, for example, they actually searched and towed my car, even though it was nowhere near the scene of where I was arrested.
Right.
So that's, violations there. Obviously, I don't want to say malicious prosecution, but that could be a possibility. But the fact that they're keeping my camera is a federal violation. There's actually federal law that says that you can't confiscate journalists' equipment, especially if there's news stories on it that need to be released. There was a gentleman that filed and won on that case in Fort Valley, Georgia. It's Dunn versus Fort Valley. Just a small case there, but it's never ending, because I tell people the state is always hiring new idiots, right? They're constantly hiring new people that don't know the law.
Right.
So even in places where I've been to places the first time and they've been just awesome. And then I'll go back there the next time just to double check.
Right.
And it's hell on earth, like insane. And it's just because, when you go to a place, let's say you go to City Hall on Monday, you might only see 10 to 20% of the people that work at City Hall on that given day, vacations or days off or sick day, whatever have you. You go back the very next day, you'll see somebody you didn't see that first day, and he's a real,
right.
And he really, gives it to you. So that's part of the reasons why we do revisits. But I'm secure in the fact that I'll never have to not do this because of the fact that the state doesn't care to educate its employees enough, and just same thing with officers. I've gotten emails from training officers that say, that this is ridiculous. There's no supervision on the streets. They ride around with these guys after the academy 1 or 2 days, and they give them a badge and put them on the street and say, "Hey, save the world," and then these guys don't have a clue what they're doing. And one of my buddies, I'm not going to say what agency he works for, but he's a buddy of mine. He works for a law enforcement agency, and he gave me his books from the academy. So I could look through them. Hardly any law at all in these training books. I think the only 2 laws I found were Terry versus Ohio and Pennsylvania versus Mims. I don't remember any other case law being in these books. There's, of course, force and use of force and all this other stuff, but very, very little law. And supposedly, these officers are supposed to, in their free time, study the law.
Okay, that's not happening.
Right.
I was going to say it's funny that the people that have the most contact with the public and the most responsibility with enforcing the law have the least training
in the law. Right. Right. And I'm not expecting these people to be lawyers. Obviously, if you knew the law that well, you wouldn't be an officer. Yeah. You'd be getting paid double what you are. Right. I understand that. But basic laws like ID law, it's basic, right?
Yeah.
As a law enforcement officer, the ID law is the law that you use most throughout your career. Every day of your career, you're using that law most, right? So to me, it's akin to a carpenter who doesn't know what a level is.
Right.
Or a bartender who doesn't know what a rum and coke is.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, how can you perform your duties if you don't know? How can I enforce something I don't know? Well, that's why we call them feelings enforcers, because they just enforce whatever they feel.
Right.
I feel this is wrong, so I'm going to tell you not to do it, or, and because of the way the law's made up, I'll just arrest you for anything and say it's disorderly conduct or, obstruction or whatever. There's a couple of catch-all charges in every state that they have to go to.
Yeah, I always love that when they're, they want your ID, and I'm detaining you. Why are you detaining me? For suspicion of a crime. What crime? You're acting suspiciously. Is that a crime? Being suspicious? Like, what am I suspicious? I'm walking down the sidewalk. I have an iPhone. I have an iPhone and I'm walking down the sidewalk. How is that suspicious? They don't know. It's like, why? Because I want you to do what I want you to do.
Exactly.
Because I'm a police officer and I did 8 weeks at the academy and I have this badge.
It's power.
Right.
It's power.
Right. It's funny because there's just you watch these. I watch these shorts and the TikToks and stuff, and I think, and so many times you'll see some cop just go nuts, and all I can think about is, wow, he should not only, like, it's worse than he should be told not to behave that way, but no, he should never be in a position of power. Like, you guys hired the wrong guy. Like, that's a guy that you need to say, look, bro, honestly, you can be in the precinct doing paperwork, but you can't be dealing with the public anymore. Like, your attitude is so detrimental to our agenda, to our goals, or to law enforcement. Like, you're behaving the opposite of how we should be perceived. Like, you're a total bully and you're unreasonable and you're aggressive and violent. You shouldn't be on the street. Right. You certainly shouldn't be a police officer. And if so, at best, you should be doing paperwork. You shouldn't even be you shouldn't even be a deputy dealing with inmates, because they're even in a worse position.
Exactly.
So, and you see those all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have like a TikTok account or?
I had a TikTok account, but time resources wise, it just wasn't doing anything for me. So I haven't been on it for a while. I have my YouTube account and I have a Facebook account that I'm pushing now, that I do most of my work on, and that sort of thing. It's what it is. We can only do what we can do.
Right.
We can only do it.
I mean, you're years away from doing this anymore. Sounds like.
Sort of. Now, I'm reworking my methods to hopefully steer away from the possibility of being arrested. Now, I told my subscribers the other day, and you saw the map. Mm-hmm. I'm literally probably one of the most hated men in the Southeast United States, because I've made a lot of people. I don't want to say made a lot of people look stupid. They made themselves look stupid.
Right.
But I exposed a lot of people acting stupid, So it's not a far stretch to think, hey, I can go arrest George for whatever, because it doesn't matter if it sticks.
Right.
Because he still violates his probation.
Right.
And I get him off the street for 2 years. So I'm kind of switching up my tactics. Like, now what I'm doing is I'm going after public records, right? So this past week, I called Marion County and I called Ocala. In Florida, you're allowed to visually inspect and copy records, right? So you can come in, you can visually see them and inspect them and copy them. It doesn't cost you anything except for maybe a little redaction. So now what I'm doing is I'm calling ahead and I'm getting them to get the records ready for me to come in and visually inspect. And I'm going after credit card receipts, credit card records, and credit card receipts for all employees. Now, I did this last year. I started pulling credit card statements last year. And I found a whole bunch of corruption, I guess you could say, or just misuse of credit card statements, the county credit cards, buying personal items, food, just all
travel,
kinds of stuff.
The stuff they always get caught for.
Right. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. And I want to say this was in North Carolina, Fayetteville, North Carolina. I pulled the credit card records for them. And on there was a credit card statement from a website. Now, on the statements, it just says you bought it from here and this is how much, but it doesn't tell you what they bought, right? You need the actual receipt for that.
Right.
So this lady bought something from this website. So I went and I looked at the website. Well, it's school uniforms for kids, $300 worth. All right. So I called up. I says, I'm going to need the receipt for this purchase so I can see what you bought. Oh, well, we don't have the receipt for that. The credit card was stolen. Somebody made that purchase using the credit card after they stole it.
Okay.
Sure they did. You know what I mean? I didn't have a chance to look into it further because I wanted to look into it further. I wanted to see the report they made, obviously, because if the credit card was stolen, they should have reported it to the police. I was never able to get around to doing that. But because of the probation, I think they're going to find that they've made a mistake, because I'm the kind of guy with my work ethic it's not going to let something go. Right. So I'm confined pretty much to Marion County. So that means I'm pretty much going to be camping outside Marion County Commissioner's house. I'm going to be following them around, seeing if they're having affairs. I'm going to be digging through every contract Marion County puts out. I'm going to be digging through every credit card receipt. I mean, I know they think they beat me or won in some aspect, but I guarantee you by the end of it, they're gonna be glad that I'm off probation and I'm back out into Alabama and South Carolina. I was supposed to be in Louisiana this year. That place is a hotbed of tyranny. Nobody wants to touch that place.
Hotbed of tyranny.
Hotbed of tyranny, boy.
Oh God, Massachusetts is horrible.
Oh yeah,
it's horrible.
Oh yeah,
with corruption. I don't know what the cops are like, but with corruption, it's rough.
Like I said, like I've seen, I've been all over the country, and it's all the same. A lot of times people call me up and they'll be like, "George, man, I need you up here. It's so bad. These cops are so corrupt." And I'm like, "You say that because you live there,
right?
You know what I mean? But in reality, that's everywhere.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, I've had my worst experience was probably Dothan, Alabama, as far as being treated and stuff. But even now, they've corrected themselves. When we went there the first day, I was there for a day. We hit like 5 locations, and every location was just a total massacre. You know what I mean? Like the first place we went, I was in handcuffs for an hour, me and my buddy, then they released us and then we went on our way. And then the next building, they wouldn't let us in. They had a herd of people. This was during COVID. They had a herd of people standing outside waiting to get in line. They incited these people against us, right? I had one lady go, "I'm going to beat you with my ugly stick," or something like crazy, right? I titled that video, "A Herd of Bootlickers Stampede the Cops." Right? I always try to find funny little things. So we left there. We went to the sheriff's department, and there was only a little lobby that we could go into. So we went in there, and then we walked out. And then like 10 minutes later, the sheriff pulls up on the side of the street. We're walking on the sidewalk, detains us. Literally, no lying, about 15 other cops show up. Sheriff, police, state troopers, right? All show up, illegally detain us, illegally ID us. And then after 30 minutes, end up letting us go. And I've got a lawsuit. I got 2 lawsuits that day out of visiting Dothan, which is the most lawsuits I've ever had. Now, when I went down to Punta Gorda, I got 5 trespasses in one day from that place, because they're crazy down there too. We're fighting them on a lot of items down there. But when stuff pops up, you gotta put your foot down.
What else happens with content? What are you going to do for content? I mean, I understand you're putting stuff up. I understand you're doing the FOIA requests on on the use of credit cards. But I mean, are you doing anything like interviewing other guys?
I haven't really done interviews per se so much, and if I do interviews, it's usually from people that I'm doing stories on.
Okay.
So like I think the last interview I did was a couple up in Kentucky, where the guy was he was going for a walk, and he had his rifle with him because he was going to go plinking at the end of his walk, and something happened, and the cops said that 4 or 5 people called in and said that he was like pointing the gun at them as they were driving down the road, and all this other stuff. So I interviewed them and got their story out. That's the kind of interviews that I partake in.
Well, there's a guy now that walks around with his, I don't know what he's walking around with, an AR-15 or something, and he's in Florida, and
solo yacker,
the
armed fisherman.
Yeah, the armed fisherman. That's it.
He's a good buddy.
Yeah, I watched one of his where he was just walking through it was an area where you fish, like a park, and the cop pulled the gun on him. Like, he's just walking, doesn't have his gun out or anything. It's just that the cop pulls his gun out and is aiming at him, and he's been, get on the ground, and whatever. He's like, the fuck, bro? Like, what are you doing?
He's been put on the ground so many times and had guns pulled on him, and I give it to him.
Right.
I'm a felon. I was a felon at 18, so I've never had a gun right. So I give it to him. The guy's got really balls of steel, and I hang out with him again every once in a while. We've done audits together, not Second Amendment, but just regular audits together. He's gone with me in a few. and just a good guy. But these are things that people need to do. We need to test the limits.
He's the one that said that one of the cops said to him, "Well, you understand that you're making people feel nervous." He goes, "Yeah, but they shouldn't feel nervous."
Right.
And he's like, "That's the whole point. Is that the more they see someone out here, with a weapon, walking around, going fishing, doing this, like I'm as an open carry thing, you should be allowed to have it. They shouldn't feel nervous."
Right.
So.
Right, and if it's the law, it's the law for a reason, right? So.
Well, I'm a big believer in like an armed society is a polite society. If everybody out there had the right to carry a firearm, or was even requested to carry a firearm, like we're asking you to, I promise you, the amount of robberies, armed robberies that would actually happen would drop by 95%.
Absolutely.
You wouldn't walk in and rob a McDonald's if you knew that there were 8 other guys in there that had guns.
Exactly.
You'd be like, "Oh, hell no."
Right. It's easy targets. It's always been that way. And just like, I don't know if you knew the story of Kennesaw, Georgia, where they passed the law back in the 80s that every able-bodied man, woman, child should have a gun, and their crime has been the same, even though they've grown 20,000 people. You know what I mean? It's amazing. The same thing with Florida. Once Florida had their carry laws and stuff put into effect, everybody thought it was going to be a bloodbath down here, and they find out it's not.
With Sweden, there's almost no crime.
Yeah,
there's almost virtually no crime, but you also have every single citizen has had to serve time in the military and is asked to carry a weapon.
Right, and is proficient with it.
Right. So, no robbing here.
No,
bad idea.
That would be a stupid criminal.
Right.
That would be a very stupid criminal. So
you just
I've been a criminal.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You just look for a softer target.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? It's not that I'm saying maybe you don't commit crime. Maybe you realize it's just not worth it, or maybe you say, you know what, I'm going to move on. I'm going to drive into Belgium. I'm going to drive into another country where they're not having guns.
Or maybe I'm going to do something like bank fraud where I don't have to interact with people, or something along that line.
Breaking when there's nobody in the store. Like maybe burglaries are slightly higher or something, but
right.
Actually pulling a gun and robbing somebody,
no.
Okay. I feel like we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Have you been interviewed before like this?
Not so much in this setting, but I have done interviews.
Like on Zoom or something?
Yeah. I was interviewed by a National Library Association or something. I don't remember the guys, but they looked pretty stuffy, and he was sitting in an overgrown chair, and hello, but it was pretty cool. But yeah, I've done a couple of them, but again, it's this stuff is not mainstream, and there's a whole group of people out there that are so against what we do that they spend.
Why?
But
I don't.
They just don't like it. Well, first of all, they think it's illegal. All right, they're part of the group that think it's illegal to go and film people. Then they think that it's harassing. You're just in there harassing the workers. Well, regardless,
you're a public employee. You're in a public space. You're subject to being recorded. If you're in a public space, you're subject to being recorded. If you're, you know what I'm saying? Like across the board, like it's just silliness. And it's like, oh, you don't have my permission. I don't need your permission. And if you're unhappy about it, then go work somewhere else.
Exactly. But see, they again, it's all about beliefs, which is why I wish that people would learn about how their mind works, right? Because if people don't know how their mind works, then they don't know how the information is coming into their brain. They don't know how it's being misused. And we are being manipulated by not knowing how our mind works, Well,
and also you're being recorded all the time anyway.
Yes.
Like you're always being recorded. People don't realize that there's...
But people say, now this is their argument, that they're not putting their videos on YouTube. The security cameras, they're not going on YouTube, or somebody's dash cam is not going on YouTube or something like that. But again, the whole point of the situation is to videotape our public officials and bring their actions to the citizens. So the citizens, because nobody hangs out at City Hall. No regular citizen goes to City Hall unless you need a building permit. So how would somebody in any town across America know how their public officials act? This guy could be a bully. I don't want to bully running my city. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't want him slapping old ladies down or not, providing services to old ladies because for some reason he's just got a bias against old ladies or whatever have you now. But people don't realize this because there's no interactions, right? So I've had more interactions with police than most people will have 70 years of their life, right? And I can see because of those interactions how these people act and what they think and what they know. Where
But people doing what they're supposed to be doing should not have a problem with, I know that, if I'm committing a crime or I was running a scam, I want it hidden.
right, absolutely.
But if you want to see me put together a legitimate mortgage, I have no problem with that. Here's the W-2s that they gave me, the pay stubs, this. I'll show you how the whole thing's put together, how I package the package, how I send it off to underwriting, how it gets approved, how you create a closing statement, how you go to closing. No problem. If I'm manufacturing documents, close the door, lock it. It's all,
under the radar.
Absolutely. I don't want anybody seeing that.
Absolutely.
So it's the same thing with any type of public officials, that if you're doing everything by the book, then you should have no problem with me watching you or
right.
videoing it or putting it up on YouTube or TikTok or anything.
No.
Instagram, whatever.
Right. Yeah, because you're not doing anything wrong.
Right.
Why
What's the
should I
problem?
worry?
Right. You're showing how efficient you are, how you're doing everything correctly, then that shouldn't be an issue. Well, hey, is there anything you feel like we haven't talked about?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered pretty much the gamut. We've gotten through my arrest, what auditing is, and I caution people. And again, I want to say that is one of the drawbacks to society is not understanding how we think.
Right.
You know what I mean? And our beliefs and stuff like that. Like when people come to me and they say, hey, I'm intelligent, because a lot of people online, they come to me and say, oh, you're wrong, and I'm like, well, how do you know I'm wrong? Oh, because I'm intelligent. There's one question I ask people that'll prove if they're intelligent or not. And that question is, what filters every piece of information that comes into your brain? What filters that? Okay? And people, 99.9% of the time, they don't have an answer to that question. And so if we don't know what filters information coming into our brain, how do we know that the information that we're getting into our brain is the right information, right? Because it could be filtering out truth and leaving nothing but lies,
right?
Which is what we have going on now. And the answer to that question, and another question that's similar to it, is what controls every action a human being does? It's the same answer. Beliefs. What you believe. Psychologists call them belief glasses, which is why eyewitnesses are so unreliable, because you got two people, they see the same thing, but they have two different sets of beliefs. So me and you were walking by an alley. I'm not going to use you because the other person is going to be a racist, but me and another person were walking by an alley, right? And we see an old white lady. She's down on the ground. She's bloody. And we see a black man above her, and he's got his hand extended. The racist is going to automatically say, this guy's fucking beating that lady.
Right.
Whereas the non-racist is going to say, maybe he's helping her up.
Yeah, maybe you just saw her, right.
Right. And
maybe he was there 30 seconds before you guys walked by and walked down the alley to help her.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't know.
And the only thing that separates that is what the persons believe. And what happens is in school, the government pounds what's known as core beliefs into our brain, right, early on. And one of those core beliefs is that the government is there to protect us, right? For us, by us,
Right.
They can never hurt us. And that's where the bootlicking, I guess you could say, the authority, non-questioning comes into it, because from long ago, it's always been in my brain that the government's there to help us. So I can't believe that these guys are going to do wrong to me. And that's where we're at today.
Yeah.
That's why people, even though they see all this stuff that's going on, that's why they still don't believe it. And they still, oh, well, blah, blah, blah.
I like Ronald Reagan said the most frightening words ever uttered were, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you.
Exactly. I mean, I've actually had a guy, he called me up from South Carolina. He got arrested. He told me the story. I saw the video. And he goes, will you tell my dad that? And I got on the phone with his dad, and his dad says, well, yeah, you told me this and you told me that. I'm going to wait to hear what the cops say. This is your son.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is a guy that your son knows that knows a little bit about what's going on.
Right.
But still, you're going to wait for that person in authority to tell you what you want to hear. And that's why in all my videos, when the cops do know the law, when they tell the folks the law, then, oh, okay, yeah, he's allowed to record here now.
Yeah.
Because the officer said it.
Yeah.
But anybody else could have told him that. Me, another customer, anybody. And
listen, I've been
won't
locked
believe
up.
it.
I've been locked up with too many cops to know that they're all telling the truth. Like I've been locked up where you lied for. I listen. What's his last name was Junior. We called him Junior. He was locked up. He was in Hillsborough County. I'm sorry, Hillsborough County. Sorry, in Atlanta, Georgia. He was on the drug task force. I forget what they called them. They had some kind of name they called them. And they were doing no-knock warrants. Mm-hmm. And this was probably 15 years ago. No, more like 18 years now. So for 10 years, they've been robbing drug dealers. For 10 years. Now they're arresting them too. Periodically, they're arresting bad guys. But every once in a while, they're just robbing somebody.
Yep.
And one day, they arrested a guy who had some, crack on him, let's say. And the guy, they said, where'd you buy it? And he randomly gave them an address. They go, you give us an address. Because he had cash and that. And they said, where'd you get this? Do they have any cash? And of course, and he said, yeah, it's a drug house. They got a ton of cash in it. And they said, we'll let you go if you give us the address. He gives them the address. Okay. So then they've got the address now. And it's in a bad neighborhood. So they then turn around and they go to what's called like a certified informant. Somebody that has consistently given them good information and that their word alone is worth getting a no-knock warrant.
Yep.
So they go to him and they give him the address and they say, you're going to sign this affidavit so that we can get a no-knock warrant for this address. We already arrested a guy. He told us where it's from. You need to say that you consistently bought drugs from that for us. Now, you didn't have a wire or anything. Here are the dates. Like they had it all. You just sign. He goes, okay. They then go to the judge. They give it to the judge. Judge says, okay, I'll sign off on it. He signs off on it. They then go and they kick in the front door. Now, it takes them a little bit to kick it in. It's got bars on it. It's a bad neighborhood. So they have to rip the bars off the door, kick in it. And while they're kicking it, boom, 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 it takes a little bit. They kick it in. They've never screamed police or anything else. They kick in the door. The 75-year-old retired school teacher that lived in the house pulled her gun and started firing when they kicked in the front door. Shot Junior in his vest, and then once through the top of the vest, through his shoulder. And he unloaded his gun in her and killed her. All she'd done was lived her and raised 3 or 4 kids, didn't make a lot of money, retired as a school teacher, and was sound asleep in her bed one night because they were used to robbing drug dealers. So they went in, they shot her, they searched the house, they realized, oh my God, there's no drugs here. So then they plant drugs there. They say that we broke in, she was holding drugs for something. Like they try and come up with this story. What is it? The people that look over them, I'm going to say AI, or what is it?
Internal Affairs.
Thank you. IA, sorry. Yep. Internal Affairs comes in. The story quickly starts breaking down because the neighbors in the neighborhood come out and are all going, oh, they're nuts. Mm-hmm. That woman does not sell drugs. Nobody goes into that. She's only got a couple kids that are still alive. They come every couple of months. We know everything. There's cameras in the neighborhood. Like it's breaking down quick. Junior, who killed her, immediately goes to the FBI and says, I'll work with you to help bust all the other guys. We've been robbing drug dealers for over 10 years. And he worked with the FBI and all of them. His whole squad, we're talking about like 6 to 8 guys, all of them had been robbing drug dealers for over 10 years.
Yep.
And so had he. I remember Junior got 5 or 6 years in federal prison. His state, the murder charge got run concurrently with it. So it was run at the same time. And he was only going to end up doing like 4 years on the murder. And he bitched the whole time he was there about how he had an agreement where he was only supposed to get like 3 or 4 years, and they ended up giving him 6, and he was going to do 4, and he was complaining the whole time. And I was like, bro, you kicked in some old lady's door and shot her. And he goes, she shot me. And I was like, she was a retired school teacher
defending her home.
Right. And he was like, we had an address. I go, an address from a drug dealer, from a drug addict that
you didn't double check.
You didn't double check. You didn't know anything. Like what? Like, I mean, bro, come on, man. And he just, you don't understand. No, I do understand. I understand you're a scumbag. You don't want to admit it. And you and all your other guys are scumbags. And that was just one time from one little department that got caught, and only got caught because it went bad. How many guys go 20 years and never get caught? I met other guys that were just consistently robbing drug dealers. Constantly. I can't tell you how many Mexicans I know that got pulled over in Georgia that I was locked up with that would say this. They would get patted down and they'd find, let's say, some meth on them. For example, I don't know, sometimes it's heroin, whatever. A little bit of heroin. Well, here's the problem in the federal system. You get so much heroin or meth or whatever that it may be, and let's say they catch you with $20,000 and the meth. It's not for usage. It's too much for usage. So now it's distribution. They will convert the money into the drug. So now you didn't get caught with just this much. Now it's this much. And that's what you're being convicted. You're being charged with. Like a kilo. Like your little quarter kilo just turned into a whole kilo because of the money. Right. And the cops would say, look, you got $20,000. If I turn in the $20,000, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get a 10-year mandatory minimum. If I turn in $8,000, you'll only get a 5-year. Do you want me to keep the 12? You want me to turn in the 20 or 8? And they go, no, man, turn in 8. They go, okay. And they take the 12 and they just keep it. Yep. Go home.
Distributed amongst their buddies.
They were happy. Like they were, thank God that cop. That's a
great cop. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, I could go on and on and on with the corrupt cops that I've met and the corruption that they were doing. And the thing about all of them was they were like, oh, it's everywhere. We're all doing, not everyone, but they were like, oh, no, this guy in the department, this guy, that this has been happening. Like there's tons of guys doing little tiny things. I'm not saying all cops are corrupt, but I'm saying that,
the opportunity presents itself. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I've got a family. Right. So, I want a boat. I want a house. I want a vacation.
So for you to sit there and think, what I'm saying is like, for me to sit there and think that, they would never lie. Like it's just, bro, it's way more common. And here's the thing. In some aspects, I'm sure they're good cops. In some ways, they probably do a lot of good. But guess what? You're also corrupt. And you can't have that guy on the force.
That's what I said.
He's probably a great husband.
Right.
But he can't be a cop.
Just because the guy rescues a kitten from a tree right before he violates my rights does not make him a good cop.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, and you said Atlanta, the federal prison in Atlanta?
Well, no. I was in Atlanta, but I wasn't in federal prison in Atlanta. Okay. I was in the U.S. Marshals holdover. And also, like Junior, the guy I talked to, I met him when I was in Coleman. But he was from Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay. Because I was going to say I audited that federal prison in Atlanta. I audited it. It's funny, too. Because
it's scary looking, right?
Oh, my God. It's gothic looking, And of course,
I've been in that one, in the holdover.
We couldn't, get past the fence. We were outside or whatever. So we walked around outside. They ended up calling the cops, and we were across the street at the gas station. When the cops showed up, we were getting ready to leave. We didn't think no cops were coming. Well, these cops pull up, and what are you guys doing here? Well, we got a call. Well, we got a call, too. What'd you get a call about? I said, well, there's guys inside the prison. They called me. I don't know how they got a cell phone, but they called our hotline, and they said there's Eighth Amendment violations, cruel and unusual punishment going on in there. So we thought we'd come by and check it out. Oh, they were confused, brother. How did they call you? how do you know? Were you in there? I was like, dude, it's so funny.
That's your department.
But we gave it right back to him. I said, why are you here? Well, we got a call. Well, so did we. They don't like it.
All right.
Yeah.
We're good?
I love it.
All right. Well, I appreciate you making the drive.
Oh, absolutely. No problem at all.
Hey, I appreciate you guys watching. And if you like the video, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell so you get notified of videos like this. Definitely share the video because that really, really does help. And leave a comment in the comment section. Also, we're going to leave George's links in the description box. So try and go to his channel and check out his videos, share his videos, and definitely subscribe to his channel. Really do appreciate you guys watching. Thank you very much, and see ya.